Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's good to see all of you here. So I'm not going to talk about food. But I am going to talk about how our minds influence our health and well-being. So I want to make this experiential for everybody. So we're going to do a little exercise to begin with. I want all of you to get comfortable in your chair. Feet on the floor, good posture, sitting upright. And what I'm going to have you do is we're going to just do some deep breathing. Because breath is essential to life, and we don't breathe very well. We have these short, shallow breaths because we're always under tension, stress. So I want you to practice deep breathing. So I want you to breathe in through your nose for 3 or 4 counts and out through your nose for 7 to 8 counts. The out breath is twice as long as the in breath. And as you're doing that, I am going to play these wonderful crystal bowls. A form of energy. And what this is going to do is it's going to elicit something called the relaxation response. And when we're relaxed and calm, we can learn better and we can function better. It's called rest and digest. It's part of our autonomic nervous system that influences how we think, how we act and react. So go ahead and start breathing, eyes closed or open, and I just want you to relax and think about some beautiful place you'd rather be. A mountain, a stream, a beach, and I'm going to play these bowls. These bowls will ring for minutes. They're quite amazing. So what I just did for each of you is I gave you a Valium, and you didn't even know it. What you just did for yourself is you decreased your heart rate, you decreased your blood pressure, you elicited something called the relaxation response. And much of today's disease is due to stress. So what we're going to talk about today is the mind-body connection, how our minds directly influence our physical health and vice versa. It's all interconnected. And how our being here on this planet, we are all interconnected with everything in the universe. So my action or reaction to something directly influences everything around me and in this universe. So we're going to take the Western paradigm and we're going to turn it upside down. So our current belief is that we are frail biochemical machines and our destiny is controlled by our genes. And Melissa talked a little bit about genetic predisposition. And so we have these genetic predispositions, so therefore we think that we're bound to get that disease. And in the vast majority of cases, that's nonsense. It's not true. The new reality is that we are powerful creators and masters of our lives, and we are able to create lives that are overflowing with peace, happiness, health, abundance, and love. You create your own reality. We are not subservient to our genes. And in today's world, we need more of this than ever before because we live in a world of hate and fear and anxiety. And every one of those emotions promotes disease state. Think of the word disease. Dis-ease. You're not at ease with yourself or with the world. And when we're not, we get sick. So this is a picture of a cell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the cell and move out to the universe as we progress through this talk. So a cell is nothing but a microcosm of ourselves. Every cell has the capacity to do everything our body does. It has a respiratory system, an endocrine system, a cardiovascular system, a nervous system. So the cell is nothing but a small version of ourselves. The current belief is that the DNA in the cell controls the functioning of the cell. It's the cell's brain. The new reality is that cells, through the cell membrane, and the cell membrane is this covering around the cell that holds all these little organelles together, that the cell membrane actively analyzes millions of signals throughout our day. And it's those signals that signal whether DNA is turned on or turned off. What genes are turned on and what genes are turned off. It's all about the environment. So Stephen Cole is a psychology researcher out at UCLA. And here's how he describes the cell. The cell is nothing more than a machine to convert experiences into biochemical reactions. That's what a cell does. It's all about the environment. So let's take a look at these fuzzy little things. Okay, we got mice and we've got rabbits. The reality, or the current belief is if a cell or being, and being means humans, animals, whatever it is sick, then there's something wrong with the cell or being. Cell biologists have known that's not true for decades. If a cell is ailing, first look to the environment. So when we try and grow bacteria in culture in the hospital, not every bacteria grows on the same culture. They need different environments to grow. So if I'm trying to grow tuberculosis, which is incredibly hard to grow, I have to put it in one environment. If I'm trying to grow E. coli, I put it in a completely different environment. So if a cell is ailing, it's not the cell, it's the environment. So let's look at these two examples. These two rabbits are genetically identical. Genetically identical. This one was raised at 20 degrees centigrade. That one was raised at 30 degrees centigrade. This one has black ears, black nose, black feet. That one's completely white. Genetically identical, different environment. And it's a thermal environment. It's not a chemical environment that was different. Let's look at these mice. Genetically identical. Genetically identical. Now, they have a defect called an MTFR defect. It's a defect in the way you metabolize folic acid. This one was not given folic acid. It's overweight, it's obese, and it has diabetes. This one was given folic acid, and it's normal. Same environment, or different environment, same genetic makeup. So what is a cell membrane? Well, a cell membrane is this little covering over the cell, and it is the sensory antenna of the cell. So it's constantly sensing environmental changes. And those can be chemical changes, those can be hormone changes, they can be energetic changes. So it could be thermal temperature changes. It could be what I just did with the sound, energetic changes. Those are all sensed by the cell, and the cell responds to that input. So you may have molecules that bind to these receptors in the cell. The receptor then causes manufacture of a protein, and that protein then goes to the nucleus and tells the gene to be turned on or turned off. That's what makes health or wellness. Our current belief is it's a semi-permeable membrane that only lets chemicals in and out. That's it. The new reality is it's the mechanism by which the cell and body translates environmental signals into function and behavior. Bad signals, bad behavior. Good signals, good behavior. Signals. It's all about our environment. I'm going to skip that one. So, we're going to talk a little bit about physics. Bet you didn't know you were going to do that today, did you? So there's quantum physics versus Newtonian physics. Classical Newtonian physics we love because it makes intuitive sense. Newton described all kinds of laws. Okay, gravity. An apple falls, it's because there's this gravitational force that's pulling it towards the earth. The current belief is that biochemical reactions responsible for life are represented by a linear flow of information from A to B to C to D. And that's the basis of pharmacotherapy. If there's a reaction that's off, let's say it's B, then we give a drug to fix it, and then we get this linear model back where everything's functioning appropriately. It's intuitively simple, it makes sense, but it's completely wrong. We do not live in a Newtonian universe. We live in a quantum universe where everything influences everything else. So the new reality is that the flow of information in a quantum universe is holistic. Cellular constituents are woven into this complex web of crosstalk and interaction. The universe, including all living beings, is integrated. We are integrated with everything in this universe. It is not as simple as giving you a drug and fixing a problem. And that's why our drugs don't, for the most part, work very well. And that's why they have all these side effects. Yeah. We live in a crosstalk quantum universe. So this is just a representation. The linear flow of information in a Newtonian universe, the interconnectedness and crosstalk in a quantum universe. If we map out proteins in a fruit fly, we can see that all of these proteins interact and crosstalk with one another. So if I fix protein 78 here, it doesn't influence just one other protein, it influences every other protein within that fruit fly. 1974, a physicist by the name of Maclare showed that energetic signaling mechanisms of electromagnetic frequencies are 100 times more efficient at signaling cells than biochemical or chemical signals. Energy. We're just all energy. Molecular biologist Victor Chabin, he demonstrated that when you take two sets of nerve cells and you put them in a barrier, so you have one set of nerve cells here and you have one set of nerve cells in this barrier container, that there was actual non-chemical signaling between those nerve cells. The first time it was demonstrated that cells intercommunicate through energetic signaling mechanisms. So, the physical body can be affected by your immaterial thoughts, your mind. The mind's energy influences our physical health as well as our mental health. It is important that we shift our mind's energy towards positive, life-generating thoughts and eliminate the ever-present, energy-draining and debilitating negative thoughts. We have somewhere between 55 and 60,000 thoughts per day. 90 to 95% of them are negative. Now, there's an evolutionary advantage to that, okay? When you saw Uncle Bob get eaten by a tiger when we were hunter-gatherers, you better remember that next time so you knew to run. But nowadays, that does not serve us very well. So let me give you an example of this. So about a year ago, I lost my cell phone. Disaster, right? Actually, it wasn't as bad as you think. It's all backed up on the cloud. But I wanted to cancel my Verizon service so somebody couldn't use it. So I go online to Verizon, and it says, great, this is how you do it. But since there's two-level authentication, they want to send me a text back to know it's me. Well, that's a problem. My cell phone is somewhere, God knows where. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have to call Verizon. So I could take two attitudes towards this. I could look at it and say, God, this is going to be the worst experience of my life. They suck. That's awful. Or I can say, you know what, I know that person on the other end of the phone is going to be able to help me out. So I went in with that mindset, called up, I got Nathan. Nathan is in Tampa, Florida. I said, Nathan, here's my problem. Great. 5 minutes later, problem solved, and I'm off the phone. Think about that. Think about how you as a human being want to have an interaction with someone else. And I use airports as an example. You walk through airports and everybody's stressed, right? Got to get to a plane, plane's late, plane's canceled, you're PO'd. But just think of that person who is at the service counter trying to help you out. You can go up and yell at that person who there's no fault of their own. And do you think that person really is going to have any impetus to help you? They're going to get you out of there as fast as they possibly can, because that's the interaction that you now projected into the universe. Whereas if I went up to that person and said, you know, I know you're probably having a really great day, and I missed my flight, but I know you're going to be able to help me out. Guess what? That person's going to help you out. They'll do everything they can for you, because that's what you projected into the universe. That's your thought. That's the energy you're projecting. It's your choice. It's your choice. Now, can the mere thinking of positive thoughts have any impact at all in our lives? Maybe, maybe not. Why? Because we have two parts to our brain. We have our subconscious part, which is this pre-programmed part of our brain that is sort of the cause and effect. It's our reactive part of our brain, and it dictates 95% of our behavior. And here's the other thing. That part of our brain is pre-programmed by the time we're age 7. And then we have the conscious thinking part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, that part of our brain that can rationalize and think and do things that make us different than every other animal on Earth. So our subconscious mind is our stimulus response mind. It's derived from instincts and learned experiences, and it's pre-programmed by the age of 7. And this is hugely important. Our subconscious mind dictates 95% of our behavior. Let me give you another example. When I was a kid, if I spilled a beverage, my mom got really mad. I mean, I'd get spanked with a belt. Guess what happens when I had kids? Guess what happens when they spilled milk? Dad got really mad. Out of proportion to what actually happened. And I thought about that as I went through this and learned about stuff. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Why would I get mad? It's milk. We mop it up and life goes on. So I worked to change my subconscious program, and I did it through meditation. You know, you sit and meditate, and you can say a mantra, do whatever you want, but I could reprogram my subconscious to not react that way. Now somebody spills something, it's like, oh, sorry about that, let me get a towel, no big deal. It can happen. It can happen. This is Hughes. Hughes is my grandnephew. He's now 9 months old. He was born in March. And little did his parents know that they're genetic engineers and computer programmers. Because that's what is going to happen to Hughes over the next 7 years. We are going to program Hughes' subconscious, and that subconscious belief system will carry him through the rest of his life. So if Hughes grows up in a loving, caring, nurturing, warm environment, he will be one person. If Hughes grows up in a state of stress, anxiety, anger, hatred, feelings of abandonment, he will become a completely different person. So if you grow up in that environment of hate, anger, fear, 1/3 of households have domestic abuse in this country. That translates into not only mental and emotional problems, but increases that child's risk of multiple chronic diseases, including heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, as well as mental health problems. There is nothing more important than being a parent to these little kids. And when kids feel abandoned, it's a disaster. Kids want two things. They want to feel safe in this world, and they want love. So it's up to you as parents. You are programming this child for either a life of health, wellness, and vitality, or you're pre-programming that child for a life of misery. It's that profound. So, what can we do about our subconscious? Well, fortunately, our conscious mind has the ability to be self-reflective. We're the only species that we know of on Earth that can actually reflect on our actions and do something about it. So when a lion sees a gazelle on the Serengeti plain, he doesn't sit and think like, that lion, it looks pretty good, but I don't really want that right now. No, it's a stimulus response in his subconscious programming. There's a gazelle, I'm hungry, boom, it's gone. We, on the other hand, can self-reflect. So I could self-reflect on my ability or my response to spilled beverages. And by doing that, I can look at that and say, whoa, that's just not right. And I can change that. So we're not stuck with our self-defeating behavior. Disempowering programs can be rewritten by techniques such as hypnosis, repetitive positive affirmations in the form of meditation, and new modalities such as energy psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy. We can reprogram our subconscious. When we do that, we begin to feel free. When you're burdened with those subconscious behaviors that were programmed into your mind years ago, you feel stuck. You feel trapped. But when you can recognize those dysfunctional programs and you can change them, all of a sudden we become free. Once the possibility and practicality of changing our subconscious beliefs is established, it becomes clear we are no longer trapped in the automatic mindset of past experiences, which often drives self-limiting behavior and self-defeating behavior. We're free to change. But here's the rub in all of this. Our brains, from an evolutionary standpoint, are pre-programmed to make negative thoughts and behaviors stick like Velcro, whereas positive experiences kind of slide off like Teflon. Why? Because there's a survival advantage, like I talked about before. If you experience something negative when you were a hunter-gatherer, that potentially was life-threatening. But in today's society, that's just not true. There are very few things in our world that actually threaten our health and well-being directly. Very few. Most of our thoughts never materialize, yet we catastrophize those. And I'm going to talk about one thing that just blew my mind recently. So, thoughts and emotions, the energy and molecules behind the scenes. Current belief is chemicals in our body control our thoughts and emotions. Fix a thought or emotion and you fix the chemical and you fix the thought or emotion. That's the basis for psychopharmacology. That's the basis for antidepressants and all the other psychoactive drugs that we give. And they don't work. They don't work because it's way more complex than that. The new reality is thoughts and emotions form a two-way interplay with our brain and our body, either maintaining health or undermining it. So every change in a physiologic state is accompanied by an appropriate change in our mental state and vice versa. That's from Elmer Green at the Mayo Clinic. Our bodies and our brains are intimately connected. You can't fix a physical problem without fixing an emotional or mental problem. It's all interconnected. Now, there are lots of molecules and other things behind thoughts and emotions. So, the current belief is molecules that transmit nerve signals, neurotransmitter, only exist at nerve endings. Not true. The new reality is these neurotransmitters circulate throughout our whole body and weave this complex interaction between all of our cells. So if we don't have enough serotonin that was alluded to by Melissa, which 90% of it is produced in our gut, we think that if we fix that with an antidepressant, that's going to fix our depression. Antidepressants don't work. They might work for a month or two, but long term, they don't work because it's much more complicated than that. There's a great book by Candace Pert. Candace Pert, should have been a Nobel Prize winner. She described the opioid receptor, but she wasn't. She wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion, and it really talks about this interplay between our thoughts and beliefs and our physical body. It's a tremendous book. But let's put this into effect. Everybody's heard of the placebo effect, right? The placebo effect is I give you a sugar pill that has no pharmacologic activity, yet you get better. Why is that? Well, we'll explain it. But there's also the nocebo effect. That's where I give you a pill, I tell you the 42 side effects, and all of a sudden you take that pill, and all of a sudden you're puking 5 minutes later. That's the nocebo effect. The belief that, oh, I'm going to get sick from this pill. Tremendously powerful. It is estimated that the action of our drugs, 40 to 60% of the action is actually the placebo effect, particularly in our psychoactive drugs. It's an amazing thing. 2002, published report by Irving Kirsch. He was a physician up in Canada. He looked at all of the antidepressant studies submitted to the FDA. He actually had to sue the FDA to get all these studies because some of them weren't so favorable as far as antidepressants. And what he determined that 80% of the response to an antidepressant was placebo. Yeah, the best thing for mild to moderate depression, sunshine and exercise. If you can get out every day and walk in the morning sunshine, that is as good as an antidepressant. What was really interesting is, as he followed this over years, he found that the efficacy of antidepressants actually got better over time. Why is that? Because they were advertised on TV more often, and so now people became convinced that that was going to help them. So they actually got better. 2002, another article. This came out of Dallas, Texas. Baylor University, an orthopedic surgeon, took 180 people who had what's called osteoarthritis, degenerative joint disease in the knee. They all had pain. And what he did is he took a third of those people and he did the arthroscopic surgery. So he went in, made 3 ports in the knee, cleaned their meniscus, washed out their knee joint. The other group, he put the ports in, just washed out the knee joint, didn't do anything with the meniscus, which are those little C-shaped cartilages between our bones. And the third group, he just made the incisions, did nothing else. 6 months later, guess who had the least pain? Yeah, well, they all had, their pain scores were exactly the same, whether you had the whole surgery or just part of it. It was the belief that that surgeon went in and fixed my meniscus. The power of belief. Don't underestimate it. Don't underestimate it. So biologic life is all about information exchange. The active exchange, the constant exchange of information in our environment, influencing how our cells function and what genes are turned on and turned off. Current belief is chronic illnesses such as heart disease and cancer are forces attacking our body and we're helpless victims. That's what the Western medical model would like you to believe, that the only way you can be healthy is that you go to a healthcare institution and get, quote, fixed, whether it be a pill or surgery. That is nonsense. Health and wellness is within every one of you. Every one of you. So we're human organisms who want to maintain homeostasis. And homeostasis means this level of health. We want to naturally be healthy. Our default is health, and what we need to do is, as human beings, is give ourselves the tools to maintain that, which is nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, good social relationships. All this stuff causes health. The new reality is conscious intervention plays an active role in health and wellness. So let's talk about stress. We talked about sugar as the silent killer, but I'm going to tell you stress is a silent killer. We underestimate how deadly stress is to our health. Okay? And so we all have stress in our lives, and we have to have stress to be healthy, frankly. If you had no stress, you would die. You'd wither up and die. But stress, in a good sense, is eustasis, meaning that we have the appropriate amount of stress to maintain a healthy balance in our body. But then we get distress, where we tip over the scale. And people want to label stress as good or bad. There's no such thing as good or bad stress. There's either stress that stimulates you to be a better person or organism, and then there's stress that debilitates. And when we move into this area of kakiostasis, which is distress, that's the time when this causes significant disease, where we can no longer function on a daily basis because the stress has overwhelmed us. And many people live in this area right here. So stress is a state of mental or emotional strain that occurs when homeostasis is threatened or perceived to be so. And this is so important because in today's society, there are very few things that threaten our actual being. It's mostly perceived by our thoughts. And those thoughts are put into our mind by a myriad of sources. So, the stress response was always meant to be an acute response to get us out of trouble, and then it was gone. So when we were hunter-gatherers, we had to look at it and say, you know, there's two guys, fight or flight. Which one's going to get eaten? The one who's the slowest. So that served an evolutionary purpose. Today, it doesn't. So what does the stress response do to us? Well, it suppresses our immune system. So think of a time when you had a lot of stress, a big project, whatever. You got done with that project, and what happens? You got sick. Your immune system was suppressed. Stress response shunts blood away from our digestive tracts and our organs of reproduction. Think of butterflies. You got a big project, you got a big presentation, your stomach's all gurgly, you don't feel good. That's because you're shunting blood away from your stomach to your brain because you're eliciting a stress response. Same thing with reproduction. And I'm convinced of this. We have more infertility than we've ever seen in this country. Why? I think it has to do with food, but it also has to do with stress. Because this inability to conceive a baby leads to more and more stress, and it just piles up on itself. And how many times have you heard of a couple who have tried to get pregnant, they adopt a kid, and guess what happens? They're pregnant within 6 months. Because the stress and anxiety of trying to conceive a child has gone. They didn't know it, but they were eliciting this tremendous stress response. Stress is particularly hard on the most vulnerable population, and that's our kids. Childhood and adolescents increase vulnerability. They have profound effects on their growth, development, body composition, behavior, endocrine system, metabolic, cardiovascular. So kids who are in an environment, like I talked about before, of anxiety, stress, hatred, they get tremendous disease states. Yeah. Stress response shunts blood away from our forebrain, our conscious thinking part of our brain, and puts it more in our hindbrain, which is our limbic system. And guess what? We don't think as well. We don't maintain memories as well. And we continue to be more anxious. Stress. Dr. Herbert Benson from Harvard, who described the relaxation response, says 90% of all office visits of physicians are stress-related. American Academy of Family Medicine did a study a number of years ago, and they came up with a number of 70 to 80%. It's a huge number. Chest pain, shortness of breath, all these infectious diseases because we're under tremendous stress. Obesity. Obesity is associated with stress. All of it. I love this quote. It's my favorite quote. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. Because we live in fear. And I want to talk about fear. Because fear kills. We're constantly besieged by fear, real or perceived. And most of it is perceived. Now I'm going to give you an example. Fear of losing our job. Fear of we'll go broke. Fear of our child will not get into a good college. I was talking to a psychologist friend of mine who moved from New York, and she was stunned at her clientele. She goes, the biggest part of my practice is adolescent kids who are so worried about what college they're going to get into. That's insane. Yeah. That's absolute insanity. But it's generated by the fear of not being good enough. We are all good enough. We just have our own places in the world. Self-defeating thought patterns create something called amygdala hijacking, where it just goes over and over and over. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't. And all of a sudden, we're this depressed blob doing nothing. My number one thing of getting rid of fear, turn off the news. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why. So, the American Psychology Association does a poll every year. They've been doing this for 13 years, and they ask people of all demographics and age groups in this country, what causes the most stress in your life? Number 3 was politics. That's predictable. Number 2 was healthcare costs. Yeah, I can understand that. Anybody want to guess what number 1 was? The fear of being killed in a mass shooting. 71% of people said that was their biggest fear. And why is that? Because the news has it on every day, and we think that people are being gunned down by the thousands in this country. Here's the reality. There were 210 people killed in mass shootings last year. How many people died on Iowa roads last year? 330. You are more likely to die getting into your car than you are going to the mall. I mean, it's just, the news distorts everything. The news plays on fear and negativity. Why? Because that's what sticks in our brain. So for another example, there was a author, Hans Rosling. He wrote a book called Factfulness. And he looked at the true facts of the world. And one of them was, people are afraid to fly. Why are they afraid to fly? Because they're afraid they're going to crash. So he took 2016 statistics. There were 40 million takeoffs and landings in the world of airplanes. Of that 40 million, there were 10 that crashed. Your chance of crashing and dying in an airplane was 0.00025%. Yet people think they're going to die in an airplane. Why? Because that's what the news reports. If you listen to the news, planes are dropping out of the sky every day. The news never reports that, oh, we had 10,000 takeoffs and landings and everybody made it safe. That's not news, but it's true. News, turn the damn thing off. I'm going to skip that. So we've talked about stress, but what's the antidote? If I give you the problem, I got to give you the solution. And the solution is eliciting the relaxation response. It's a physiologic response that's the opposite of the stress response. It decreases metabolism, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and slows your brain waves. That's what we did at the beginning of this talk. And you can take that home and practice it anytime. Deep breathing, meditation. So, 2 steps are required to elicit the relaxation response. Number 1, repetition. So you need to be repetitive in what you're doing. It can be a sound, a prayer, a word, a muscular activity. There's something called progressive muscle relaxation where you tense your muscles, you relax it, and you go down throughout your whole body. But then there's a passive return. When thoughts interrupt that process, which they will, you return to the process immediately. You give the thought recognition, and you let it go. You do not react to the thought. That's the whole basis behind mindfulness meditation. The other part about repetition is you have to practice this every day. It's like a musical instrument. You can't play the cello if you don't practice every day. Well, you can't be good at eliciting the relaxation response if you don't practice it every day. So what are the benefits? Muscle relaxation, quieter mind, decrease in negative emotions, increase in positive emotions, enhancement of creativity. When we're stressed, we're not creative. We're just trying to make it through life. Multiple studies have shown that mind-body interventions that elicit the relaxation response affect gene expression. Okay? There's that energetic signal to our cells to either turn a gene on or turn a gene off. The relaxation response elicits flooding our body with the chemicals that make us feel good. Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. Whereas the stress response floods our body with molecules that don't make our cells function well. Cortisol, epinephrine. The relaxation response. Our mind and body are intricately connected. You cannot separate the two. And we're going to go even farther beyond that. It's not just our mind and our body, but it's the 100 trillion bacteria in our body too that are also signaling our brain and our immune system and everything else. And those are affected by how we think, and those affect how we think. It's amazing stuff. And we're just scratching the surface on this stuff. So what are mind-body interventions? Well, meditation is one of my favorite ones. It can be practiced by anybody. There's not a right or a wrong way to do it. You just do it. Yoga, autogenics training, which is sort of this, you elicit, you have this training script, and I've got one up here. Biofeedback. So for those of you who need objective criteria to see that something's actually happening, biofeedback is great. So you elicit the relaxation response, we hook you up to an EKG, and we look at what's called your heart rate variability. the higher your heart rate variability, the more healthy you are actually. Progressive muscle relaxation, clinical hypnosis, guided imagery, breathing, yes, breathing, and then something called forest bathing, one of my favorite things. And it's not what you think. Breathing. So Andrew Weil, I did my integrative medicine fellowship with Andrew Weil down at the University of Arizona. Remarkable man. Breathing is the bridge between mind and body, the connection between consciousness and unconsciousness, the movement of spirit and matter. Breath is essential to life. You don't breathe, you die. But we don't breathe very well. So, breath is the key to health and wellness. It's the only body function you can consciously perform, but also unconsciously does it on its own. When you look at Buddhist meditators, these professional meditators, meditating tens of thousands of hours in their lives, they can not only control their breathing, they can control their heart rate, and they can control their body temperature. Remarkable stuff. Remarkable stuff. So, let's do another quick breathing exercise you can take home with you and practice every day. It's called 4-7-8 breathing. It comes from the Eastern Indian Buddhist tradition. And what it is, I'm going to have you take a breath in through your nose, and I'm going to count to 4. You're then going to hold that breath for 7, and you're going to let that breath out through your mouth for 8. And what this does, it's going to stimulate the relaxation response. You practice it twice a day, 4 cycles each time. And as you practice, you can use this anytime you feel anxious or stressed. I use it at red lights. So I can turn a 1-minute red light into a 5-second red light. It's really good. So let's do it. Everybody get comfortable. Breathe in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In through your nose, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. Take it home. Practice it morning and evening. You're having trouble going to sleep. Practice your breathing exercise. Your teenage daughter is driving you nuts. Say, hold on, sweetie. I'm going to breathe, and then we'll discuss this. Serious. I'm dead serious. You want to go into an interaction with a hostile person as relaxed as possible. Because if you do, guess what that other person does? They begin to relax too. When you go in tense and angry, you just start ratcheting up the emotions. Yeah. There it is. Meditation. Meditation is the cultivation of basic human qualities, such as a more stable and clear mind, emotional balance, a sense of caring, mindfulness, love, and compassion. We do not have enough love and compassion in this world. We want to kill generals in Iran. We want to bomb this. We want to bomb that. We talk about hate. We talk about, we have all this hatred in this country, and it comes from the top down, but you do not have to buy into that. Approach everything in life with love and compassion, as if that thing on the other side of you is you. How do you want to feel and be treated? So there's a guy by the name of Michael Brown, a wonderful guy, wrote a book called The Presence Process. And he taught CEOs how to go into board meetings not stressed. And the key was, before you go to a meeting or an interaction, you can use this anytime, anywhere, you visualize and try and understand how you want to feel after the interaction. We don't do feelings very well, but you really want to feel. How do I want to feel when I walk out of my board meeting? Sense of accomplishment, warm, whatever it is. And guess what happens? He turned his board meetings from these anxious, anxiety-provoking things to these wonderful meetings, just by visualizing and understanding how he wanted to feel after the interaction. So if you want to feel tense and angry, go in tense and angry. If you want to feel relaxed and with a sense of profound accomplishment, go in with love and compassion for everybody in that room or wherever your interaction is. Yeah. 3 types of meditation. There's focused meditation. It's aimed to tame and center the mind. Meditation is not necessarily religious. Yes, it comes from the Buddhist tradition, but it does not have to have religious connotations. Prayer is a form of meditation. We just call it prayer in the Judeo-Christian system. Mindfulness meditation cultivates less emotional reactivity and awareness of emotions. So there's something called MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. It was initially, John Kabat-Zinn was the founder of that about 40 years ago at the University of Massachusetts. It teaches us to meditate and take thoughts that come to our mind all the time, acknowledge the thought, and then just let it go non-judgmentally. Non-judgmentally. We judge everything every minute, every day. Someone walks in the room, or so you're walking down the street, and you see someone of a different color, and immediately, what do? We clutch our purses tighter. We move a little bit to the side because we have this built-in bias that because they're not like us, they're different and they're dangerous. That's just not true. That's just not true. We have to learn compassion and love for everybody and everything. When you do, your life changes completely. So what is meditation good for? Mental health. It's good for chronic pain, anxiety, depression, general psychological health. Loving kindness meditation, where you repeat these loving kindness meditations. You might say, I am at peace, I am healthy, I am happy, I am free of disease, I am free of anger, whatever it might be. Really good for PTSD. Somatic health, we don't have as good a data on somatic health. Does it prevent heart attacks? Does it do this or that? But what we do know is that when you do meditation and you measure chemicals in our blood, it decreases inflammatory molecules in our blood, it downregulates inflammatory genes. That all improves health. Guided imagery. It's kind of a form of self-hypnosis. It's daydreaming, basically. And so what we do with guided imagery is we walk you through a beautiful scene so that in your mind you visualize, you smell, you listen, you hear, you touch, you feel this incredible journey through wherever you want to be. And the fact is that to your body, it's almost as real as if you were there. We use it a lot in pre-op, post-op. We use it a lot on the cancer floor. Autogenics, this is a tool that facilitates, again, the state of consciousness that evokes the relaxation response. And this is what you do with Autogenics. You sit in a meditative position. You say, my right arm is heavy and warm. You repeat that 3 times. You go to the left. You go to your legs. And all of a sudden, you're just like a piece of Jell-O. Wow, feels really good. Biofeedback, again, we hook people up to monitors. It could be neurobiofeedback. It could be heart rate variability. It could be skin temperature. But you go through and you do meditations and elicit this relaxation response, and you get this objective feedback. Shinrin Yoku. He says I have 1 minute and 48 seconds. I get 1 extra minute. It's called force bathing. So Shinrin Yoku is the Japanese term for force bathing. It was described in the mid-'80s. And basically what force bathing is you slowly and contemplatively walk through a forest, absorbing everything the forest has to offer. Sights, sounds, touch, feel, smells. I did forest bathing. I took a group out a few weeks ago, and they were sniffing the soil, and they were looking at acorns and feeling them. I had a 1/4 mile mapped out. We made it 100 yards in an hour and a half. They were hugging the trees, feeling the bark. So forest bathing is about absorbing what the forest has to give, but giving back. So you thank the trees for their energy and their beauty and their oxygen, and you thank the soil and the microbes in the soil. So it's a two-way street. But what the Japanese have found is when you immerse yourself into the forest and you engage all of your senses, you reduce your stress, heart rate, you improve your mood, you improve your immune system. They've shown that you increase the number and activity of what are called natural killer cells. Forest bathing, it just takes a forest. Go walk contemplatively. Relationships and socialization. This is a huge one. So again, Stephen Cole, psychologist, UCLA researcher, he says there is nothing that can hold a candle to disease compared with social isolation. Not sure I believe that, but it certainly is a huge component. So if you actually measure stress, this is, quote, using our best instrument, social isolation doesn't hold, or social isolation is the best established, most robust factor for disease out there. May be true. So people who live alone or have the perception of loneliness live 4 to 9 years less. Harvard has been doing a study since 1938. It's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And what they did is they took 724 men from Boston, and they have followed them their entire lives. Half of them were Harvard sophomores, half of them were just from Boston. John F. Kennedy was in this study, actually. And they followed them throughout their lives. They looked at their social behavior, their medical, their labs, their exercise, everything about their lives. Because what they wanted to determine is, at age 80, what's the best predictor of health and longevity? It wasn't how much sugar you ate, it wasn't your waistline, it was how well you were engaged socially. And when they said good engagement, what they meant was that you have people in your life, whether it's 1 or 100, that no matter what the circumstance, you can call on that person 24/7, 365, and they'll do anything for you. Yeah, social relationships. We are human beings. We are not meant to live isolated. We're meant to live in a social format. That's why things like this are so great, because you learn from one another. You engage with one another. Socialization, hugely important, hugely important. So, we are architects of our own experience. You truly are. Marketers will tell you you have to look this way or you have to act this way. That is nonsense. You are the architect of your own life. And you can choose a life of abundance, health, wellness, love, compassion, or you can choose a life of hate, abandonment, anger. God, we got so much anger. You listen to that, whatever that guy's name is in Washington. He's always, have you ever seen him smile? Have you ever seen him smile? No, he's angry all the time. And now we become angry. Don't do it. Don't fall into the trap. Go home. Give your kids a hug. Give your neighbor a hug. Really, it makes you feel good. It elicits oxytocin when you do that. James Dottie. James Dottie is a neurosurgeon out at Stanford. James Dottie grew up in a household with a depressed mother who could never get out of bed and an abusive alcoholic father. What's the chance he's going to be a neurosurgeon at a major academic institution? Well, he met a woman by the name of Ruth, and he wrote a book called Into the Magic Shop. And Ruth taught him all about these things, how our mind works and how we can cultivate our own life. And every day, he now runs the Compassion Center at Stanford. Every day, he meditates in these 10 letters: compassion, dignity, equanimity, forgiveness, gratitude, humility, integrity, justice, kindness, love. When you repeat these things and you ingrain these things in your subconscious, guess how you act? And guess how you feel? And guess what? You don't have a heart attack. You may not have cancer. You may not have depression and anxiety, because these are things that make our cells respond in a profoundly different way than the world we tend to live in. So, have at it, enjoy your health, and you are the architects of your life. Thank you very much.